everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty. If you're new here, my name's Melanie. Welcome, welcome. And my returning art and craft friends, I'm so glad you're deciding to take another art break with me today. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of art as well as some crafting. I'm going to be showing you how to create a simple watercolor using some Crayola markers on watercolor paper and just using a simple brush. This would be a great project to do for a girls' weekend get together. I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to be putting them inside of a small embroidery hoop, jazz them up a little bit, and they're going to make a perfect gift, something to display, something fun for your home for Christmas holiday. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration. We have two hosts today. We have Krista with Krista's Crafty Life and Brenda with Rustic and Lace DIY. Now you're going to find the links to their channels inside of the description box, as well as the playlist for all of the other creators who are participating today. All you have to do is hit that playlist link and the videos will run from one into the other. It's a great way to get some inspiration for the beginning of Christmas. Well, let's go ahead and I'll show you where I begin this project. I used a 4-inch embroidery hoop. Just cut your paper slightly larger than your embroidery hoop. Once you have your paper cut, you're going to make 2 circles. You need to trace around the outside of your circle. That makes the paper large enough to glue onto your embroidery hoop. And then once you get it traced around the outside, go ahead and trace the inside of your embroidery hoop area. And this is going to give you an idea of how large you need to make your painting so your area will be covered. So you're going to have 2 circles in the end. The first design I'm going to show you is the manger one. I'm going to make a large X there in the center of my paper. This is going to be the cross arms of the manger, and then draw a line about midway through, and that's going to be the bed. Now to create the little body, do a little M shape or kind of like a loaf of bread shape. That's going to create the body. Then do a half a circle at the top for the head, and I do a little curl in the middle. Add a few little accents on the side just to give the blankets a little bit more folding, and add a little line at the top. On to the second one, we're going to do a church. So we're going to start with a little triangle shape at the top and then come down with a long rectangle. This will be the front of the church. Now come up from that area, do another little roof line, and that's going to be where your steeple is going to be. Off to the side, make 2 angled lines and come down and connect the bottom of your church. Your church is going to need a little bell tower, some windows, and then I put a really large door in the front. The last one we're going to be creating is a little bit of a Christmas sheep. So I'm doing an upside down triangle, putting the 2 ears off to the side, coming off to that one ear underneath the right, coming down a little ways, and when I get to the center of my nose, I'm going to do a line up and down to create the front of my sheep, come back at an angle, make a little rounded rump, and I have my sheep drawn. He's going to need 2 legs, one on each of that little bottom lump side, and then one in the back. He's going to be having a Christmas wreath in the end. I'm putting a little bit of a puff at the top just to be able to add a little bit of the wool up there. And there's our 3 designs. Let's put a little bit of wording on each one. So on this one I'm going to be writing "Away in the Manger." I'm just using my own handwriting. I always say handwriting is rather like a drawing skill. The more we practice it, the better we get. And sometimes I think we are our own worst critic when it comes to handwriting. This one's going to have "Oh Holy Night." So I put "Holy" in the middle above my church and then put the other letters on the side of that. And this one, I'm simply going to write "Merry Christmas." It might help if you were to put a little bit of an arch over the top of the sheep, and then that would help create that line a little better. I had to erase mine to be able to get my letters in. And there we have our 3 images all ready to go. Now the next step is to get your Crayola markers, a little bit of water, and a plastic bag. And this is how we're going to create the watercolor look. You can just use a simple brush, whatever you might have, and I'm going to be using some plain salt to create a decorative paint look. The paper I used today was the Canson watercolor paper. All watercolor paper is different, and I really do like to use the Canson brand. I've used it quite often and I get a really nice result. Here I'm getting my markers ready to do the watercolor look. I'm basically taking my markers, making a patch of color on the plastic. You may notice it's not sticking so well, but we don't really want it to stick. We just want it to be the color on the plastic so we can just add water to that area and make our own watercolor. There's basically two ways that I apply the watercolor. I either take it from my bag, make little puddles of watercolor on there, and then put it on my brush and apply it to the paper, or I can take the marker directly to my paper and then soften that color with just plain water. The one thing about watercolor is that you want to start light and then work your way darker. So start light and bright and then add more colors. This one I'm going to go ahead and just wash some of the color at the bottom, a little bit of that golden color just to represent straw or hay. And then I'm going to be creating a very colorful sky area with some of the turquoise that I used for my baby's blanket. I start with my light color and then add that darker color on top. I have a paper towel in my hand so I can constantly take water off on my brush so I'm not adding too much water. Here I'm starting with that light color and then adding that darker turquoise. And I have a really dark blue that I love to use in this Crayola set, and it only comes in the super tip colors for some reason. But it adds a beautiful night sky. So my sky is fairly dark. It's a combination of the turquoise and then that dark rich blue color. And you can kind of tell my paper is fairly wet. At this stage, I'm adding some water, a fair amount of water on my brush and my color. And this is going to help the salt do its trick. So I'm just using some plain table salt and then sprinkling it on there. I'm going to leave the salt on until it completely dries, and then I'll brush it off once it's dried. It's going to create a very pretty dappled look in my sky. To begin the church, I take my dark brown marker and I outline the roof lines of my church. Then once I have the lines, I just take a wet brush, a little bit of color, and I go ahead and I touch that area where I have my plain marker on the top, on the roof lines, and I bring that color down into my building areas. So I'm basically getting my color pools of color from the marker that I already have directly on my paper. To create a Christmas wreath above my door, I took a green marker and I just tapped my color into a round circle. I didn't want it to be an exact circle, so I was leaving some open areas and just creating a fun little wreath area. I wanted to create some pine trees off to the side, so I took my same green marker and created a line down the middle and then swooped some little evergreen boughs off to the side. Simple little trees to create. I'm going to be softening this color with just plain water. So I'm using the tip of my brush and then going right over my marker. And this is just going to soften the color and create a real pretty look for my tree. I used the same turquoise that I used on my first picture to create a little bit of a snow look at the bottom. So just a light wash of that turquoise created a nice little bit of a snow look. I used the same turquoise for the sky and that dark blue for the sky as well. So first I start with my dark turquoise and wash that color over my night sky. Once I have my sky filled with the turquoise, I then pick up that dark navy blue and add it right to the edge and then tap it in here and there around the inside. Making sure my sky has plenty of water. And then I'm going to be adding the salt on it next. You might want to keep it on a tray so your salt doesn't go everywhere. So sprinkle your salt on there. It's nice and wet. And remember, you're going to leave the salt on until it's completely dry. Now let's go ahead and add a few more details. We need to choose a color for that door. I thought maybe a brownish red color would be a good color for the door. For the bell tower and my windows, I chose some of that turquoise and the blue combination to paint those in. It's all coming together and looking really great for just being the simple Crayola marker. I forgot to hit the record button for my lamb, but I basically did it the same as the others. Here my papers are all dry, so I'm giving the salt a brush off, and you can see the beautiful texture it creates. I'm going to be adding some black sketchwork lines on my work. I'm using a Micron 01. It's a permanent marker. You could also use a Sharpie marker, ultra fine point as well. Both of these markers are permanent once they dry. I'm coming in and I'm adding just some very creative line work, not necessarily copying over what I've already drawn, but loosening my line work and adding more of a sketchbook look to my items. I can double up on my lines and add more of that quality of a free form line. It really does add a different hand drawing quality to these little illustrations. For the lettering, I'm going to be using a gel pen. Gel pens are great for adding a little bit more detail. They have a rich quality of ink in them. The thing you need to be aware of is that the ink does dry a little slow, so make sure you're not dragging your hand through them. This one has a little bit of glitter in it as well too, and I think I bought these at Walmart. They're not that expensive, but they're a great art material to have in your box of fun things to add to your paintings. To add the white lines to my paintings, I like to use the Uniball Signo pen. It's got a great white ink, it stays white, it has a rolling end on the end, a metal end, so it works great for just creating some beautiful white lines in my paintings. It's a pen I always have in my box of pens. I wanted to add some bright touches of metallic gold, and this Deco Art Gold marker is a favorite of mine. I believe I bought it at Hobby Lobby or Michael's, but it's a great gold pen. To brighten my little windows, I chose to use the gel pens as well there. These ones do have a little bit of glitter inside, and I just simply make lines back and forth with a couple different shades of blue, a light and a dark. I have a copper one and I use that over the top of my door. I'm just creating line work up and down and creating more of a texture on the wood. I go back to using my Micron pen and draw little lines going down, creating more texture on my church. And again, adding more of those sketch quality lines throughout the little painting really does bring this little painting to life. To add a little extra twinkle in the sky, I use the Uniball pen and add a few little twinkly stars in the top, and then I used my white pen and did little vertical lines up and down on top of my church, adding another layer of texture. To create the cross, I used my bright gold marker, and it worked perfectly, just to create a little bit of sparkle at the top. My little Christmas land needed a little bit of sparkle too, so I have a green pen that was another green glitter gel pen. I used that on my little guy, and then I came in and enhanced the fur of the wool of my sheep using that sketch quality line once again. To add a little bit more color to him, I did add on a red Christmas bow off to the side. I used the gel pens to create this little element. Use the black gel pen to write Merry Christmas at the top. And then to add some more twinkle to my sky, I took my Uniball pen and created a few little stars in my night sky. Once my pieces are dry, I'm going to clear coat them. Watercolor isn't a permanent medium, so you do need to clear coat it. A couple coats of light clear coat is better than one heavy coat. For the backs, I'm going to be using this felt. It does have a sticky back on it, so I'm going to be sticking that on the back just to finish off my pieces. I want to draw on the outside of this with my pencil, and then I'm going to just simply use the scissors and cut it out. It'll work perfectly to finish off these pieces. To add a little bit more interest to those embroidery rings, I went ahead and used a little bit of the Stays On ink to tint the edges all the way around. To add a little extra sparkle to my pieces, I took some Elmer's glue, put it on lightly here and there, and then took a brush and spread out my glue. I wanted to be adding diamond dust to my pieces. I didn't want full coverage, I just wanted it here and there. When using diamond dust, make sure you have something underneath it to catch all that extra sparkles. Put it all over the top. Go ahead and drop it off. There's nothing that sparkles quite like diamond dust. The pieces are sharp, they're glass, so you do want to make sure you're capturing it and putting it all back in your jar. To glue my pieces on, I used Aleene's Tacky Glue. It was nice to have the open time for the glue. I tried hot glue at first and it just did not work. It dried too quickly and I couldn't get my pieces positioned on correctly. So choose a glue that you will have a little bit of open time with. And the Aleene's worked perfect. Once they were glued, I did put some heavy books on the top just to make sure the seal was going to be all the way down on my paper. It wasn't quite perfect on all the edges, so I did use a razor blade to be able to go ahead and trim around the edges, just to clean off the white paper. And this is where I'm going to be using this sticky back felt. You'll be surprised at how sticky it is. It's very sticky, so go ahead and make sure you kind of position it over your piece before you lay it down. But even if you don't get it exactly correct, which I don't quite get it correct here, you can go ahead and trim it off with the scissors around the edge, and that works just fine too. When it comes to the finishing touches, sky's the limit and you can add whatever you might have in your stash. You won't be using a lot of materials to do this, so even the little bits that you might have could be perfect to be able to decorate your items. For the top hanger, I decided I would use some coffee-stained dishcloth is what I had. I had some little strips of that, and that worked perfect to create a hanger. But you could simply use jute, ribbon, whatever you might have in your stash. To do the little greenery on top, I just focused on having a variety of color of greens. So I used some soft green ones, and then I had some bright green with a little bit of glitter, which I thought looked nice. If you were doing this as a part of a girls' weekend, you could always have your guests all bring a little bit of greenery or some of their doodads that they might have, a little bit of Christmas stuff, and together you could come up with something really nice. You can see me adding a little bit of those red pit berries on there. I thought that little pop of red looked great, so a few of those tucked inside added a little bit of splash of color at the top. And here you're going to see me use some seed pods from my lilac bush out front. I love these little seed pods. They really do stay put together. I think these were left over from last year, but I'll take those little seed pods and I'll spray them with some clear coat spray, and they last a long time, and it's a great little seed pod to use. I couldn't decide whether I was going to use the rusty bell or the pine cones, but I decided to use the pine cones. And I thought it was a nice finishing touch. Once I set the pine cone down, I noticed I was going to need to fill it just a tiny bit more, just to fill up a little bit of space. So that's when I used those bright sparkly pieces and just tuck those right on the inside. As a finishing touch, I created a small little wispy bow out of some cording that you use for jewelry. I just glued it off to the side, held it down for just a tiny bit till that glue starts to dry, and I thought it finished it off really well. And then of course, once I got the bow on, you know how it goes. Sometimes you got to add a few more pieces. So I ended up tucking just a few more of those pit berries in amongst the greenery and around my bow. I'd like to say a special thank you for Brenda and Krista for putting together this fun Hello Christmas collaboration. Make sure you check out the links to their channel inside of my description, as well as make sure you click that playlist. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to make something to begin your Christmas season with. Since these were going to be hanging together as a set, I continued on with the same process of starting with the light greens, putting the pine cones on, and then adding the different layers of the pit berries and the pine cones on the top. Well, let's take a look and see what these little guys look like all done and hanging together. If you're new to my channel and you like to do art or crafts, come on over and see what I have to offer. I do step-by-step drawing tutorials on Tuesday nights on my YouTube channel. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Give me a thumbs up if you think you might make these. Leave a comment and let me know which one is your favorite. Well, thanks for joining me in this fun collaboration today, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.